Hello and welcome to the 29th episode of the Pirate Rugby Pod. We've hit 800 YouTube subscribers, so a huge thank you to everyone for tuning in. You may now see that a super thanks button is now available below the video, which is a little heart with a dollar sign in it. This is because the channel has grown to the point where we're now able to monetize it. If you click that button, you can give us a tip if you like what we do. We don't set the prices on YouTube, and of course, no one has to click if they don't want to. Thankfully, Hugh and I both have our other jobs to pay the bills. We will also be rolling out channel membership soon, where for 99p per month, you can get even more exclusive content. If anyone has any ideas for what we should include in that, please do let us know.
Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and subscribe to our Substack as well. Links are in the Linktree link in the description box below. If you subscribe to the Substack, you'll get all of our content sent direct to your email inbox, including our Sunday Read feature, which is a long read article that we do every week. This week, Enda wrote about 5 ideas for rugby broadcasters to improve the viewing experience for their customers. So make sure that you check that out. Okay, let's hop into the show and do our moment of the week. What was your rugby moment of the week this week, mate?
Mine was just the return of Super Rugby, and in particular, the opening game between the Chiefs and the Crusaders. Super Rugby for me is like I have a nostalgic feeling about it. I've always gotten up for it. I always get excited about it, and we're getting through the Six Nations now. We're quite close to the end, so it's great having Super Rugby back. I loved getting up setting the alarm for 5 to 6 Friday morning, getting up for a game, and especially a game that was played in such good conditions. Running rugby, seeing Damien McKenzie back on the pitch was just something to behold. So I was just delighted to have it back. We had a great show on it last week. It does seem like their interest in it has maybe fallen away somewhat, especially in the Northern Hemisphere. But for me, it always has kind of a special place. So absolutely delighted it's back. What was yours?
So mine was a try that was scored in the Paris derby in the top 14. So I'm sure a lot of people will have seen this by now. So Dakawaka, the winger, playing for Stade Francais, scored an unbelievable 110 meter try, picked up the ball. He didn't actually pick it up in his own dead ball area. He picked it up on his own 5 meter, ran back into the dead ball area to beat a man, then ran out of it, chipped it. It bounced near a player who was injured. He picked it up and then just out sprinted the cover defense and scored a try. It was unbelievable, like the definition of a solo effort. And, I kind of went into that game. You talked about Super Rugby. So we're now in the time of year where Super Rugby and top 14 overlap. And they overlap for quite a few months now. So you watch Super Rugby in the morning and it's obviously Super Rugby offloading, running, blah, blah, blah. And then you come to top 14 and it can feel like a massive culture shock. It's like watching a different sport sometimes. It's just so different. So I kind of went into this Paris derby on Saturday night, I think it was, with preconceptions of what the game was going to be like. I was expecting a typical French, like 14 points to 11 or something game. And it wasn't that at all. There was loads of tries. It was dead exciting. A fantastic performance by Stade Francais. And I think I even had it on mute. And I just kind of looked up. I was doing something else and I saw him catch the ball and then run past, and I thought, he's better be a defender there. And I thought, the defense isn't set in front of him, And then he went on and do it. It was kind of like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. I think he actually scored another try in this game as well and should have scored a third, but ran himself into touch. So yeah, loved that. And obviously it's gone a bit viral on Twitter now, so everyone should have seen it. So yeah, that was my moment of the week. If you have a moment of the week, dear listener, hop onto either our Twitter or our YouTube and let us know in the comments or the replies, and we'll read out your moments of the week on next week's show. Right, let's not hesitate in getting into the Six Nations chat then, mate. So this is the first ever Pirate Rugby derby. This is the first time a team that you support and a team that I support have played each other, as far as I'm aware. So it was Ireland versus Wales, the big one. To the victor go the spoils. So I'll let you go first. What did you make of the Irish performance? Because I've seen it in some places saying that the Ireland were a bit disappointing, a bit sloppy. I don't know. Do you think that's fair?
That was my initial reaction after watching the game for the first time. But I've rewatched it since, and I actually think Ireland were a lot more composed than maybe the general narrative that is out there. Like, yes, they were sloppier than previous games. But I think overall they played so well. Like all the usual suspects, like Bundy Aki getting man of the match yet again. He was just an absolute weapon in the game. He just goes from strength to strength since that World Cup. Yeah, there is that narrative out there, but for me, yeah, they played very well, very composed at times. There's been a bit of chat about the lineup, kind of maybe going a bit astray. Like we lost our first lineout of the campaign in this game, which is the third round, which is really impressive. But I don't think the lineup absolutely capitulated. There were a couple of issues. Like there were some sloppy balls for sure, but it wasn't as if there were loads of overthrows and a lot of turnovers in possession and stuff like that. So I think that was a bit exaggerated, but definitely not where it was. But certainly up there. I think the scrum was pretty solid as well. We've spoken about Porter a good bit on here. I thought he again maybe shut up some of his doubters and
with a little help
critics
with just a little bit of help from Peter O'Mahony.
With a little bit of help. And he was penalised in the game as well. Let's not shy away from that. But I thought again the scrum was pretty much a weapon. It was really interesting. I think in the first half, Ireland, barely kicked the ball. I think it was on. I think there after 17 minutes. I put down in my notes. There were no box kicks from Ireland. So I think they really, it's just a joy. Like we'll get on to the England game later, but for me, watching Ireland is it's such a pleasure because you get to see them spreading the ball and throwing offloads, just playing with that bit of freedom, and every player just seems so clued into what the team is trying to achieve, and how good is Jack Crowley as well. Like I know he wasn't maybe a standout player, but I thought he's just we often forget that Sexton isn't there anymore, and you barely even notice it with Crowley there, and that's I think a massive credit to Crowley and to the team around them as well, and to the coaches for backing him. Like this experience is really going to stand to him in the future, and he's such a young player. But yeah, he had a great game, I thought. But yeah, it was exciting to watch Ireland play in the first half. Again, a few errors and everything, but I think maybe that's to be expected against Wales. Like maybe they were just not as clued in as a game away to France. Like I know it's potentially a bit disrespectful to say that, but let's call a spade a spade. Like Ireland played, they pretty much smashed Italy. We can say not as bad as previous years in terms of it being a cricket score, but did they play to the best of their ability in that game? I certainly don't think so. But then in the second half, I think that there was a bit of a lull period. I think Wales came out pretty well in the second half and they kind of put it up to Ireland. But again, Ireland's defence was so immense. And then both teams started to play a bit more conservatively. There were a lot of kicks, which I think was to be expected. But then Ireland pulled away in the end. But yeah, like I could name the entire starting lineup, but just some absolute standouts. Yeah, Aki, McCarthy, Crowley for me. I thought Frawley as well at fullback. He had big boots to fill, and I think he was really composed. So it was lovely to see him get that try as well.
Yeah, I was going through because I do my stats posts the day after the game, and I was going through Ireland's stats, and everybody had double figure stats in everything. It was ridiculous. Particularly the Irish forwards. Tyke Byrne's stats in every single game are a joke. James Lowe's stats. Like if I'm James Lowe, I'm pissed off at Tyke Byrne because James Lowe is like, I'm clearly the best player in the whole Six Nations except for Tyke Byrne. And it's just not interesting to say how good Tyke Byrne is now. But to your point about, the lack of kicking in things. So Ireland kicks less than both Scotland and England this weekend. That's just of the home nations. I don't have the stats for France and Italy to hand. But so I do these graphs on Twitter, which are like the spider graphs. So they're like, it's basically circles, and the wider your circle is, the more attacking you were. And Ireland's circle is the widest out of all the home nations this weekend. The ball in play time in this game was something like 44 minutes, and there was 1 7-minute passage of play with the ball didn't go out of play. That's insane. Meanwhile, Wales's one is much smaller. So for audio listeners, I'm making big and small circles with my hands. Wales's one was like a different planet of how we played compared to how you played. So do you think that's who Ireland are now, or do you think it's kind of a one-off game thing? Are you now a ball-in-hand team?
I think Ireland have been trending towards becoming a more ball-in-hand team. Like they do, we've said it numerous times, all the best teams in the world kick the ball quite a lot, 20 to 30 kicks a game. Sometimes I think it depends on the opposition at times, and obviously on the conditions. Like conditions were pretty favourable as well, so they allowed both teams to play a bit more of an expansive game. But I certainly think so. Like so far, the Six Nations Ireland seem to be playing a lot more with ball in hand. But I think they've been doing that for quite a while. Like, and it's quite interesting seeing Ireland under pressure, or if they receive a kickoff, they're not afraid to run it a bit and set up a ruck in the middle of the park so that the ball gets back to low and he fires it up about 100 meters up the pitch. It's ridiculous. So they just seem to be playing with a lot of confidence as well, and they don't seem like they're nervous and they just know exactly what they're doing. But they certainly seem to be playing with even more ball in hand. But again, I think the big test now will be against England to see if they try to do that. I don't think they'll be allowed to, because I think England will slow Ireland's ball down, especially at ruck time. I think that's a given, and I think I don't think England are going to beat Ireland, but I think it'll. A lot of people are saying Ireland could win by 40 points. I don't think that's going to be the case. It's away from home, and I think in the last couple of years as well, England seem to be quite good and successful at slowing Ireland down and making it sloppy, making it a bit of a dogfight. But yeah, it's for me, it's excellent rugby to watch. I don't know what are your. I've spoken a lot about Ireland. Like, what are your thoughts from Welsh perspective, looking at that Irish team?
I agree.
How playing?
I think it was a brutal game, and I think it was very high quality from both teams. Obviously, Wales, the thing that hampered Wales the most was themselves, especially in that first half, the amount of penalties that we gave away when we had the ball. Like without the ball, we were pretty solid, and I know like we conceded 4 tries, but like the last of those 4 tries was in the 82nd minute, and it's like, oh, I don't want to be like, oh, we worked hard RFC, but I think the reason that some people are saying Ireland were a bit sloppy or a bit off their peak was because I think Wales made them look like that, and I think to be fair, this Welsh team shouldn't be that close to Ireland, really. Like, if you were to expect any of the Welsh regions to go away to Leinster, you'd expect 50 points on pretty much all of them. So it's a credit to Gatland. And Russ Petty did a post today about comparing last year's Six Nations to this year's Six Nations. Wales's stats are pretty much better across the board. And I think that is a massive credit to Gatland to take what is essentially a scratch team and turn them into that in such a short period of time. So, I don't think any Welsh fan was expecting us to go over to Dublin and win. If they were insane. But I think we were a lot closer than we expected to be. I think we frustrated Ireland with our defence quite a lot. I think we need to progress our attack, and we need to come up with some new ideas in attack, because in that second half period where we were on top, and we were doing the old-fashioned Gatland Warren ball, just hitting out one-out runners to try and tire you out, and that worked in 2019. But A, we don't have the ball carriers to do it anymore, and B, now that you're doing the 6-2 split, Farrell not quite emptied his bench, but Farrell brought on 5 new forwards from between 50 and 55 minutes, and that just completely negated Wales's fitness advantage, because Warren Gatland's game plan has always been around being fitter than the opposition, but if you're doing a 6-2 split, it doesn't matter anymore. That completely takes away, and I think Farrell played it perfectly with his substitutions and has had a great game plan. When all the Welsh fans saw that Irish bench and saw how meaty was the word that was going around that Irish bench was, it was like, oh, crikey. So it was better than I think a lot of people expected, and I think Wales are still on an upward trajectory. I think we need to come up with new ideas in attack. We need to come up with set plays. We need to come up with more shape, more variation, because, like I say, the old game plan. And Wales's attack, when we've been coached by Gatland, has never been good. Like, we've won Grand Slams with like record fewest tries scored. I think we've got the record for the title with the most tries, which was under Pivac, which was 20 tries. And we've got the record for the title with the fewest tries, which was 2 years earlier under Gatland with 10 tries to win a Six Nations title. Well, no, it might have been 2012, actually. Like, we scored 2 tries against Italy in 2012 when we got the Grand Slam. Like, that's just the history of Warren Gatland's Wales. That's what we're like. So, kind of okay. Cam Winnett continues to be excellent. Like, Squidge Rugby tweeted, like, if you put Hugo Keenan in a Wales jersey, how much better than Cam Winnett would he be playing? That might be a bit of hyperbole, but I think Cam Winnett deserves all the praise in the world for how he's playing at the moment. Sam Costello as well, an unbelievable defensive performance. 17 tackles. He had Bundyaki running at him all day and didn't really flinch. Speaking of Bundyaki, it's interesting to me that most of the best teams in the world, even if you include France, who we'll talk about later, you can name who their 12 is. Like, if I ask you who's Springboks 12, you go Dialende. Who's Ireland's 12, Bundyaki. Who's France's 12, Dante. Scotland's Tuipulotu. Whereas all the other teams, like England, who's their 12, don't really know. Australia, who's their 12. Some people might have suggestions who it might be, but there might be consensus. Like Wales is kind of Nick Tompkins because there's not really any other options at the moment. I just find that interesting that 12 has been such a key position, and for a while it felt like 12 was a bit lost because you had like the double playmakers like Ford and Farrell or whoever it was. Excuse me. But now it feels like the crash ball 12 is back, and because now everyone in Wales is saying like, oh, we need a proper crash ball 12 will change our game. And I'm like, I remember when we had Jamie Roberts, and Welsh fans were like, get Jamie Roberts out of the team. He's not exciting enough. He doesn't distribute enough. He doesn't step enough. And now look at us. We're all begging for a Jamie Roberts style player to come back. So I find that quite interesting.
Yeah. And Ireland are very lucky to have Bundy because, yes, he is great at that crash ball, but we all know he offers so much more than that, especially in defence. And then in attack, he's got a good passing game, good offloading game, plays with his heart in his sleeve. Like he's the ultimate, I think, competitor. And I think Ireland are just very, very lucky to have him. And again, like I think a player like Robbie Henshaw, I know we're talking about 13 here, but I think he's been really good since he's come back from injury. Ringrose is out with an injury at the moment, so I think he's got a real fight in his hands to get that jersey back. But Ireland have some special talent in the centres at the moment.
But Big McCluskey apparently is off to Bayonne, is it? That's the rumour?
Allegedly, but he is contracted to Ulster until 2025. But as we know, so was their head coach, who we discussed last week, who is now gone. He was actually contracted for at least another season. Maybe that's a discussion for another day, whatever's going on in Ulster Rugby. But yeah, that's the rumor that he's going to go. If he does, fair play to him, because he's not like it's tough for him to get it ahead of those brilliant players we just named. And if he's offered a big contract, yeah, power to him.
Yeah, and I'll just bring the next Leinster freak clone off the rank and drop him in, and we're fine. Speaking of, so you thought Frawley was good? Do you think he's a fullback now? Is that debate settled?
I don't think so. It's really interesting listening to the Left Wing podcast, which gets a lot of heat from certain fans. I kind of like it because it's a little bit controversial, and you get Luke Fitzgerald on there, who isn't everybody's cup of tea. But I like to change up my podcasts, and he isn't afraid to give an opinion that a lot of people won't like. And one of his points is on Frawley. He thinks that he should have already left, Leinster to become the number 110, because he does want to be a 10, but he is now unfortunately this utility player who can play across the backline, and he isn't getting that opportunity to focus on 10. And then of course he plays for Ireland on the weekend, and where does he play? He plays a 15, filling in for somebody who was injured. But I certainly do think he has the talent, but I don't know where's. I would say his best position is 10. That's where I've seen him most play. He seems like a really good player. But he's so valuable having that player as well, though, that hybrid player who can play across the back line.
It really helps the 6-2 as well, having a player like that.
It does indeed, yeah. Like we all know that Joey Carberry, when he was at Leinster as well, he wasn't quite similar to Frawley, actually. Like he wanted to be a 10, and that's the reason, obviously, one of the main reasons why he went to Munster, but Leinster often played him at fullback, where he was actually really effective as well. And because just like you talked about that dual playmaker role, like between him and Sexton at times when they're both on the pitch, you had so many different options and so many different ball players. But yeah, I certainly think he should be thereabouts, but I'd like to see him get more time at 10. And it was interesting, this exact point came up on the Breakdown podcast or show from Sky Sports in New Zealand, who mainly cover Super Rugby and all things the All Blacks. I'm sure a lot of our listeners have heard of them. And they were, John Kerman's point was that, a lot of, if a player does play 10 and 15, like him personally would like to see that player get more time at 10, develop himself as a 10, and then get time to step in at fullback. But first and foremost, 10 is probably the most difficult position on the field. So you need to get as much game time as possible. Like if you look at somebody like Barrett, he wasn't playing 15 half the time and 10. The other half at the beginning of his career, he was 10, established himself, and then he was moved back. So I think hopefully Frawley gets an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, Wales are kind of bucking the trends at the moment with an out-and-out 15, because most other sides play a fly half at fullback. So that's why I kind of half expected Kai Evans from the Dragons to be playing fullback for us, because he does play 10, and people think of him as having a bigger boot. But funny enough, I've looked at the stats and they don't necessarily reflect that in the URC so far. But yeah, it's an interesting point. So it'd be interesting to see where he moves on, because he's not the first. Frawley isn't the first choice in any position at Leinster, let alone Ireland. So I'm interested to see how that goes. Do you think Grand Slam? Are you more confident or less confident about the Grand Slam going forward now, or not changed?
More confident, quietly confident. I think unchanged probably. I did, like, I won't lie, when I was watching this game, I had my eyes on Twitter probably for longer than I did on the actual screen, and maybe that's why on first glance I thought it wasn't an amazing Irish performance. Then when I watched it back, as I said, I thought they played much better. But for me, it was a foregone conclusion. But I think Ireland's next game now against England in 2 weeks' time is going to be, like, people might think that that's a foregone conclusion. I think, again, as I said earlier, Ireland are going to win, but England are going to make it bloody difficult. And actually, I'm looking forward to that, because I think England, they're just going to come out all guns blazing, play the most backward game of rugby, not style of rugby, I should say, and just slow everything down. There'll be a red card. Yeah, you heard it here first.
Okay,
yeah, I think it'll be a good game.
Let's segue onto that then. So again, we'll talk about the victors again first. So start with Scotland. For me, Scotland's reinvention this season is going massively under the radar. Like, some people are talking about it now, but all the attention's been on England's rebuild, and we'll come on to that again later. And obviously Italy got the new coach, and Wales got all the new players and things. Scotland have completely changed how they play, and it's really impressive. And they have just gone from this jouet team, this attack first, carve you open type team, to we're just going to kick the ball. So they carried 86 times against England. Like, they carried the least of any team, and they kicked the most of any team. And it's working absolutely perfectly for them. Yeah, I know they had a bit of a tricky second half against both Wales and France, but it just suited. And, you have to bear in mind that they gave England a 10-point head start in this game, basically, and still won it pretty comfortably, pretty easily, to be honest. I don't think there were some Scottish players who had excellent games, like Scott Cummings in the second row, I thought was excellent. Finn, as he normally is in the centres as well, and of course Big Doan on the wing. But they just needed a few players to have a few special moments, and that was enough to beat England. So I think you can now say that Scotland are clearly a step above. And for me, I'm always kind of got the debate in my head of, are they the leader of the chasing pack, or are they the chasers of the leading pack in terms of the world and the world rugby rankings and the top four and things? And I think they're definitely a clear step ahead of most of the other teams in the Six Nations, for sure. But yeah, I just think Gregor Townsend has got a lot of stick, but you have to say that he's completely changed the way that Scotland play this season. And I feel like this is a lesson learned from the World Cup, of he's gone, right now, if I want to be taken seriously, I need to change. And he has changed, and it is working. Finn Russell still 100% off the tee, and I know that, like, goal kicking is kind of like seen as a bit of an extra, and it's like not seen as that important, and you don't necessarily rate a 10 a lot of the time on their goal kicking. But remember the World Cup, and like the World Cup final, and South Africa's struggles with goal kicking and things, and he had some hard kicks against England, and he nailed them all. So that deserves a shout out for me, Finn Russell's goal kicking. But yeah, I don't know. Let's keep it on Scotland to begin with. So what do you make of them and how they're playing at the moment?
Just touching on Gregor Townsend, I think that shows such maturity from a coach as well to maybe accept and look at himself and look at the results and the way things were going, and just decide, because you're right, like it is a different style that they're playing. Like it's so clear watching them that the amount of times that they're kicking compared to previous times, with Finn at fly app as well. Like a lot of outsiders might think that they would play a more running style game, which they did for years, and it didn't really result in any silverware, did it? But yeah, credit to Townsend for having that maturity of saying we need to change things up. But like, yeah, I don't think like for me this was a very frustrating game to watch. From both the Scottish perspective and an English perspective, and just as a spectacle as a whole. I think Scotland just did enough to hang in there, and I think Duhan van der Merwe was the winner. Like he was the difference. He made the difference between both sides. I think Finn is playing really well. He's justifying his cheeky little two lines that he has in his hair. I don't know if I'm sure you've noticed with his kicking display, but his kicking display has been outstanding. As he always is, he's playing with a smile on his face and on his face, and they're still taking risks. But yeah, it's kind of potentially a banana skin for Ireland with the way Scotland are playing, because let's face it, they should have, and realistically they did beat France, which I think, yeah, and that for me that's no coincidence. Like this obvious change in game plan is paying dividends. So I think that really makes that fixture against Ireland all that more juicy. But yeah, they're a fun team to watch as well. When they have those superstars making those breaks. Duhan is, yeah, he's a superstar.
There was a debate on the Scoop pod about whether Duhan will the Springboks say that he's one that got away, and I'm like, you're kind of fine with the wingers that you got. You don't need all the wingers, but it reminded me of the try he scored in the 1872 Cup against Glasgow at the Murrayfield again, when he just burned down the wing and he just put the hammer down. Scotland are drawn comparisons that I've heard from a few different places now. People are comparing them to New Zealand. Now, at first you're like, are we really comparing Scotland to the All Blacks here? Like, come on. But I kind of see it in that they control the game. They don't overwork. They don't force anything. And they let you make the mistake, and then they pick you off on their mistake. So 2 of their tries came from turnovers, I think, from England. And then another one came from some bad defense. I was listening to Dan Bigger break down England's blitz defense, and it was really good. And he said, look, we blitzed under Sean Edwards for years, and he said we would never have done what England did for that first Scotland try, because it was a bad mistake. It was shocking defense. And they burst through. Hugh Jones has his annual good game against England. But yeah, like I said, the Scotland, they just hold you at arm's length and then pick off the tries. And I can imagine if you were watching that as an England fan. I've been there loads of times as a Wales fan watching us play the All Blacks, where it feels like we're giving them a game, we're giving them a game, we're giving them a game. Hang on, we've lost by 20 points. How did that happen? And maybe Scotland are going to be able to start getting there in some of these games. And like I say, I feel like they've established themselves as clearly, 6 Calcutta Cups in the last 7 seasons. They're clearly ahead of England now. There is a level above them. So let's talk about England. We've gotten to the bit in the script which says England bashing. So you can go first this week, and then I'll come on to it later, because everyone's caught up now. So 2 weeks ago I was calling bullshit on the England rebuild, and now everyone's doing it. So we need to be a step ahead. We need to double down. So what extra can we call out about England at the moment?
Look, there's no shying away from it. They were poor. Like the standout for me was just, I believe it was 25 handling errors and 24 turnovers. Like it was just, they're just so frustrating. Like I'd hate to be an England fan, because I just find their style of play so boring to watch. But it's as if like for me that they did try to play a lot more rugby in this game than compared to their, say, World Cup games. Like I thought they tried to play with a bit more oomph, that a bit more like they had quick ball, but then it was like, what the hell do we do with this quick ball? Like, and then just some of their basic like handling, or like just their passes weren't out in front of their men. Like, it was just, they went out, they said, okay, we're getting all this criticism because, you know, we play a boring style of rugby and all we do is kick the leather off the ball. Let's try to play with a bit more ball in hands. But for their ball in hand, I think is mainly just one-off runners, or little tip-on passes, and they just seem to really lack handling skills at the moment. And this is something that we spoke about during, like, even before the World Cup, during the World Cup. Like, it's an issue now. Like, I know the conditions weren't perfect, but like, there does come a time where you have to have a certain stand. Like, I don't think you'd see an Irish team drop the ball that amount of times, and that's where they should be, especially with their player pool. Like, it was just, for me, that was the biggest frustration, because it just takes the momentum out of a game, especially when they're building, and then it's just a drop ball. But I really do think they just try to play a bit differently in this game. They said, we'll try to just play with a bit of pace, create space, bring all that, you know, that famous grunt that they bring to games, and make it a nightmare at the breakdown. But again, their discipline was poor at that. Like, it's just, I find them so frustrating to watch. But I really do think now, having said all those negative things about them, they're going to come out in 2 weeks' time and put it up to Ireland, and put in a decent performance. They will not play, I don't think, similar to the way they did against Scotland. I think they will just absolutely kick everything. And this isn't to say that they played with a lot of ball in hand. I think against Scotland, they just tried to be a bit more ambitious. But it's like, after one or two phases, if they're not going anywhere, they just, like, it's as if they just run out of options. They just put these little dinks, little chips through that just lead to nothing, and the ball just rolls into touch. Or Ford gets into a good position, and then his first thought is, I'm going to fire this up in the air. And I just think, yeah, that they need to, for me, like, England under Borthwick are going nowhere. Like, they're not going to win any silverware, and that will only change if he's gone. Like, it's not a nice thing to say, but like, let's call a spade, that they're going nowhere with him in charge. And for me, I think it might have been a scoop, or maybe on this pod, where we said, you know, we asked each other, like, where should England go now? Like, what should they do? And I remember saying what they need to do is just focus on their basics and focus on their kick pressure game, and just get really, really good at that. And I think that's what they're going to do against Ireland. I think that's what they should focus on, that boring brand of rugby, and they should stop trying to do anything different, because I don't think they have the coaches, and I question if they have the players.
No,
but they have the playing pool, and they've somebody like Zach Mercer not playing for them, which is just bizarre. Anyway, what's your take on?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, they're supposedly trying to change their style, but with all the same players, and everyone's finally woken up to the fact that they haven't actually changed their team, which is what we said 2 weeks ago. You say that they're trying to play a bit more. Their first possession in the game, it was a line out, is one phase, and the ball went up in the air. And I was like, there you go. There's England. They're back. And I tweeted after the game via the Pirate account, like, so that was the old England played. When does the exciting new England kick off? Like, it's, and I completely agree with you. Why are they trying to change? They're not going to do it. They're not going to change. They're not going to play exciting rugby with the players that they've got, and they're not going to do it well with the coaches that they've got. Stick to it. Why are the players coming out and saying, we want to connect to the fans and we want to play exciting rugby? Why is the England captain Jamie George coming out and saying, we want to change how we play and be more exciting? Own it. You got to a World Cup semi-final and nearly beat South Africa. Why aren't you coming out and saying, yeah, this is how we play and we get results? This is our identity. We are that team. Because at least, you know, just that you can get a bit of respect for saying that, and people can buy into it. Would you ever catch the Springboks apologising for how they play? Or New Zealand apologising for how they play? Ridiculous. Own it. Be who you are. And like I said, Ollie Lawrence found out at test level once again, the annual finding out of Ollie Lawrence. You're not playing against Gloucester every week, Ollie. Sorry. Like, that's if you look at the stats that Russ Petty put out, they're worse than they were last year. And like you say, they're going nowhere. And I feel like there's a real power struggle going on in England. Like, there was a whole banter about the 4 vice captains thing. And my little conspiracy theory about that, and it is only a conspiracy theory, you know, 3 of those 4 vice captains are directors of the new player group, the Team England rugby thing, since they split from the RPA and they're now represented. So I just feel like Borthwick is new coach. Remember, he got the England job in his second full year as a professional coach. That's when he got that job. And I feel like there's a bit of a struggle going on in the dressing room. Something's not right. I don't understand why all the players are coming out and saying they need to change how they play. And they're just meh. Like I said, Scotland are clearly better than them. And I just don't. I completely agree with what you said. Just go back to the old game. Like whenever they've been under pressure, like they've been behind at halftime in every game so far this Six Nations, and I think they've been behind at halftime, like against teams like Samoa and Fiji and things in the last games, who are great and massively talented players, obviously. And then in the second half, they always just go back to the old thing, and the whole thing that everyone's talking about Ben Spencer. You know, everyone was saying bring Ben Spencer in because he'll help ignite England's attack. 4 minutes from time, trailing by 10 points, box kick on the halfway. This is who they are. Yeah. So why I don't understand why people are expecting England to change, and I completely agree with you. They're never going to change whilst Borthwick is in charge. So why not just be who you are and be good at that rather than trying to fake your way into something else?
Yeah, like we made a big deal out, and rightly so, of Eddie Jones sacking, but like what has changed, and especially in terms of style of play, like nothing. Like
they're more conservative than they were under Eddie Jones.
Yeah, they just have an English guy as their head coach now. It just and it's interesting that you mentioned Borthwick's kind of lack of experience, which is spot on. I think like during our discussion of Raj 2 weeks ago, Rona Gara, like he's done the opposite where he's just spent so much time in the club game now, so it's almost going to be an inevitable step for him. But it would have been a mistake to put Raj in charge. Like imagine Raj being in charge of Ireland after a year or two, coaching La Rochelle or coaching Munster or something. Like it would just be, and then he'd be slated, and then I don't think England are going anywhere, and I don't think they are going to go anywhere until there are some serious changes. But yeah, if they just focus on what they're good at, they can get to a World Cup. They can get further than Ireland do in a World Cup.
Yeah. Okay.
Shall we move on to the most depressing game of the weekend?
Yeah. 13-all draw between France and Italy. Obviously, the big talking point was the ball hitting the post at the end, and we're not going to talk about like should the kick have been retaken, because my kind of view is if it had gone over, no one would have cared. So it is what it is. The players charging at it didn't make it fall off the tee, unless there's some kind of very funny pressure differential going on inside the stadium. Great stadium, by the way.
Although the smoke issue was quite annoying
to
watch.
I think they were all just having a cigarette in the stands watching it, being very French. So come on, what's happened to France? What's gone wrong?
It's your typical French situation. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see Galtier gone, even before the end of this tournament. I don't know what's gone wrong, and obviously, it was interesting listening to Bigger speak about it on the pod this morning. Like for him, it's obvious that they haven't gotten over that quarterfinal defeat in the World Cup. It's a question that we asked on this pod. With the beginning of Six Nations approaching, we said, how will France and Ireland react to the World Cup disappointments? And France have just reacted really, really poorly. Like I don't know if it's a mental thing. Have the players lost, confidence in the coaching staff? I don't know. Like they just seem like a different team, don't they? Like obviously they've got some major injuries. They have Antoine Dupont lighting up the sevens world, but there's got to be more going on than that, because they haven't lost half their team. You know what I mean? And it's
funny you should mention that. So I've just looked up. France put 60 points to 7 on Italy in the World Cup just a few months ago. So I've just looked up the team for that. So the team was, back to front, Ramos, Penaud, Ficou, Danty. So identical to the team that started against them at the weekend so far. Biel-Beret on the wing, and then Jalibert and Luku. So Dupont had his face smashed at this point, so didn't play in this game. So out of that back line, 6 of the 7 players are the same. And then we go into the front row. Cyril Bay wasn't there. Malvaca, Antonio, Woki, all there. Flamont wasn't there. Gelange wasn't there. Olivon played in that game, and then Aldreet obviously was injured, and Kroos was on the bench. So Kroos started this game. And Taufi Fanua was on the bench as well, as was Aldegheri. Bugarit, I think, was there as well. So it's not a massively different team. It's just, I can't put my finger on what's wrong with them. Now, obviously, they lost their inside centre to a red card, which was a stonewall red card, and I'm glad there's been no debate about it. And they
what a stupid red card, though. Like,
bend at the hips, Dumpty.
Yeah,
it's not hard.
There was no mitigation. That was one that I think the ref could have, given a straight red card for. But
yeah, I don't.
Look, the bunker's there for good reason. Like, yeah, I don't blame the ref for. Like, it takes away so much. Like, I like the way they just take that decision away from the ref, and it's just dealt with, and then there's no drama there, no replays. We're not wasting time. I do like that, but for me, it's almost you need to just give that straight away because it was so idiotic.
So they had to have a bit of a reshuffle. So Ramos went into 10, but he's been playing 10 all season. Now, he hasn't played much 10 for France. I don't know how many games he's played at 10 for France, but he's played all but one game for Toulouse at 10 this season. And then, fortunately, they had Moafana on the bench, who was a 12. So Moafana could come in and slot at 12. And then, so you haven't lost too much there. So I think they were playing without a winger because Labelle, the other winger, has played fullback a fair bit. So he'd moved into fullback. So the rejig wasn't so bad. And I think they'd emptied their bench by about the 48th minute. They'd made all of their changes. So they kind of coped with it, but they just didn't. Something's up with that team. Something's just not clicking. Now, I would be shocked if Galtier lost his job. I think that would be incredibly harsh. Like one bad Six Nations and you're out. But, très French, I suppose.
It's the French, yeah.
Jouet. Italy. I saw Rugby AP tweeted, shout if you're listening. If you are listening, DM me. Tweeted, it's the best Italy performance of the professional era. I disagree. I don't think Italy were particularly good in this game. I don't know if you've got a view on that.
I don't think it's not the best Italian performance we've seen. For me, a lot of this came down to how poor France were.
I think both teams were poor. I think Italy scoring one try on the 65th minute, like, is that the best you can do, really? It was a really good try. I'll give them that. And Capuzzo getting into all of the teams of the week off the back of that try, I'm like, I didn't think he was that good. I didn't. Obviously, Manincello, who we identified on the pod with the Switzerland Scrums crew, picked him out as being a star of the future, and he absolutely is. He's fantastic. But I didn't think Italy were all that special. I thought this was two teams really struggling. And a lot of people in Wales now are going, there's this one particular guy who I won't name because I don't want to burn any bridges, but he's a broadcaster. And everything about Wales that he tweets is negative. So whenever the Welsh squad is announced, he's like, oh, look at these players we haven't picked. And then he after this draw, he was like, oh, that result is bad for Wales in both ways. I'm like, what? And I'm like, oh, because France will be wounded and they'll come for us, and then Italy has shown that they're good. I thought both teams were poor. And there's a lot of people in Wales now saying that, I reckon we could have a go at France in Cardiff. And Italy are better than they were at the World Cup again, but that's not saying too much. I don't want to have hubris about it, because God knows we've lost to Italy in Cardiff before. But I think Wales are a step ahead of Italy. I'm kind of comfortable with that. Italy have got some fantastic players, but they're still a bit soft. The amount of territory that they gifted to France in their 22 and the mistakes that they made in their own 22, it's still like same old. Someone messaged me, they need to get the Sean Edwards kick the fucking ball when you were in our own half type discussion.
It's incredibly frustrating to watch that.
Yeah.
Unless you're Ireland and they've got a complete structure to it and they're going straight back to low.
Yeah. So like I said, I thought both teams were quite poor, to be honest. And I think a 13-all draw is representative of the game. It would have been great to see Italy win it. And don't anybody think that I'm hating on Italy. I'd have been thrilled to see Italy get that win. It would have been historic. But I just thought it was a poor game all round, to be honest. I mean, 13-all, there's kind of the clues in the scoreline, really. Anyway.
And let's not forget that Italy have a new coach as well, and they're building, and we know that their sides are doing really well, relatively speaking, in the ORC. So I think that it's definitely a good sign, but I wonder, does it point more towards a really unhappy French squad management? Who knows?
I had a question about this, and people can let me know in the comments if this is completely outrageous. Are Benetton better than Italy?
It's a really good question.
How would Benetton get on in the Six Nations? Because I think I know how Leinster would get on in the Six Nations. Really well. So I don't know. It's one for people to ponder. Anyway, let's move on to a bit of other chat then. Is there anything else that we needed to add on the Six Nations there, mate?
No, I think that looking forward to the last 2 rounds. We could be in for some upsets. I think Wales have a great chance against France. They absolutely do. Gatland will have them fired up. I think England will make a good game out of, I don't know, a good game, but they'll make it competitive against Ireland. Yeah, it's an exciting few weeks coming up, and maybe it'll all come down to that last weekend with Ireland v Scotland, and maybe Scotland will win. Not going to happen, but still.
Not going to happen. All right, there's so much rugby to talk about other than the Six Nations. It was crazy, and it's getting even crazier next week. So we'll strap in, everybody. Right, so we're going to start with women's rugby. So the Rugby Europe Women's has started. We've talked about the Rugby Europe Men's on a couple of pods. I thought Rugby Europe Women's was starting this week, but no. So it's a bit confusing. So there's rather than being played in sort of your normal full game week, Rugby Europe Women's is being staggered, and there's a very good reason for it, which I'll explain to you now. So the Netherlands have played 2-1-2. They've played Portugal and Sweden, and no other games have been played other than those 2 games. The reason for this is that the Netherlands are the highest ranked women's team in the world not playing in WXV. They have a playoff game against Colombia in a couple of weeks. I'm not sure of the exact date. I'll check later. And so the winner of that game gets promoted to WXV3. So it's actually a promotion relegation playoff. So Colombia would keep their place. Netherlands would get promoted into it. But that clashes with when they wanted to play this Women's Rugby Europe Championship. By the way, there's only 4 teams in it, I believe. Netherlands, Spain, Sweden, Portugal. And Spain aren't going to kick off their games until, I think, the last weekend of the March, and then they play all 3 of their games 1 week after another. So much more normal. So this is spread out quite far. So between Netherlands' last game and their next game is over a month in this competition, but it's because they've got that playoff game against Colombia. This has all been negotiated by the participating unions, and it's been all agreed. So this is what's happening. The next game is in 2 weeks' time, and it's Portugal versus Sweden. So that's what's happening. So at the moment, Netherlands are top, and people are expecting Netherlands to win it. Be interesting to see how Spain gets on. Right, what's happening in the PWR?
So Gloucester Hartpury are still on top after beating Sale, where there was also a 19-all draw between Quins and Exeter. There is a good bit of PWR action coming up on our screens this weekend, but we'll get into that when we get down to the TV guide. What's going on in the Celtic Challenge?
So we had the penultimate round of the Celtic Challenge. Wolfhounds from Ireland have been crowned the champions. This was the amalgamation of Leinster and Ulster with the patchwork kit. And I think they were comfortably the best team in the whole tournament. They always looked like they were going to be the winners of it, and they have. So congratulations to them. Inaugural winners, historic achievements. In the other game that happened at this weekend, Gwalior Lightning beat Glasgow quite handily. And next weekend, there is a big Welsh derby at Parc y Scarlets. So there's a doubleheader at Parc y Scarlets in West Wales between Clovers and Edinburgh, which should be a very good game. They're 2 very good teams. And the Welsh derby, which is happening after that. So hoping for a good crowd to turn up to Parc y Scarlets to watch that. Gwalior will be favourites due to being, like I said, an excellent team. But it's a home game for Thunder, and Thunder are my team, so I'm of course backing them to win. Right, into some men's or / junior rugby. No, junior rugby first. So under 26 nations, Ireland beat Wales predictably quite comfortably, 43 points to 5, something like that. England beat Scotland.
Sold out Park, Musgrave Park as well, which is quite impressive.
Oh, was it? Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Did you watch much of that game?
Didn't catch much of this game, but it's also, so I don't know if you're familiar with Musgrave Park, like it's Munster's second ground, so like it's where Munster are playing Zebre this coming weekend. So it's not the biggest stadium by any means, but that's still a very, very healthy figure to see. So great result for the guys.
Yeah, like I said, England beat Scotland, but Italy beat France. So Italy beat France in a friendly before the Six Nations, and now they've beaten them again in the Six Nations proper. So historic moments. Italy under 20. You have to remember France are the world champions, by the way. Don't forget. I know that under 20s, obviously the team refreshes quite regularly, but still. Italy under 20s have been building for a few years, and they've been getting closer and closer and closer. So for this to finally happen is excellent. They gave Ireland an almighty scare a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, fantastic. Forza Italia there. The other junior, it was kind of junior and kind of not game that happened, was England A versus Portugal A, not Portugal Senior, as some people have claimed. It was Portugal A. Mm-hmm. Played at Welford Road. Not a competitive game. Finished 91 points to 5 in favour of England. So England's team was a senior team. It wasn't really a development team at all. Like Charlie Ewels was playing in it. So there was players who have played for England seniors. And this Portugal team was a very developmental team. You could see there was a clear difference by the conditioning of the players. The England players were visibly much bigger, and there was a lot of Portuguese players really struggled to make successful tackles and things. I've only seen the highlights on YouTube, so I can't speak for the full game. Portugal did score a try, which got the biggest cheer of the day, of course, and it's great that Portugal are getting these opportunities to play these games, but I don't know, I kind of question what this England A side was for, really, because there were so many really experienced players in it that I'm not sure what kind of purpose it served. People saying that it was to capture players who were dual qualified, so now they play for England A, they're tied to England. Anyway, Portugal A now play an All Ireland League team, don't they? I think is their next game.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, so we'll keep an eye out on that. Hopefully that's a bit more of a competitive fixture. Right, Southern Hemisphere. So we split this weekend's Club Rugby Roundup to Southern Hemisphere and Northern Hemisphere. So we're doing Southern Hemisphere first. Going to start about Super Rugby. So generally, mate, we've seen loads of clips go viral and things. You watched the Chiefs Crusaders game. It feels very back, doesn't it? It feels like a lot of excitement about Super Rugby on socials and things at the moment.
Yeah, and it's a lot of prominent Twitter accounts pushing it, which is good to see. Pushing it a lot more than Sky Sports, which is so strange. I said this last year. The Sky Sports Rugby Union Twitter account has not tweeted about this tournament. And Sky showed every single game live this past weekend, and they're showing every single game live this coming weekend. It does show you where Sky's head's at, I think, is in terms of their coverage of Super Rugby and how much they value it. But it's still really disappointing that they're not pushing it more. But or sharing clips as well. Like everybody's sharing clips from like Stan Sport and from Super Rugby Pacific's page on Twitter. So that's quite strange. But look, I'm delighted it's back. I really hope the Australian teams are more competitive this year. But look, let's like, I don't know, for you, like, are you like, for me, there's a bit of a narrative out there in the Northern Hemisphere that it's lost its aura. You know, it's lost the South African teams. People don't care about it as much. We spoke about it at length last week, I suppose. But did I guess I'll rephrase it. Like, did the game's results kind of live up to your expectations? Are you excited for this tournament still?
There was no shocks in the results for me. None that I saw. Maybe the Reds beating the Waratahs by a hefty margin, but apparently the Waratahs had a really nasty injury in their captain's run the day before the game that kind of affected them. Apparently, that's what Jade told me. Shout out, Jade. Hope you're having a great day, mate. I don't know. Super Rugby is definitely the best at promoting itself on social media. And I think there's people who see the clips but don't actually watch the games, who think it's like a magical, amazing thing. I'm quite grumpy and I'm quite a purist. So when I see like the Reds, or I can't remember whether it's Reds or Rebels player, hoofing the ball on the volley, I'm like,
Reds.
grow up. I've got no time for that kind of nonsense, personally. And there was another clip of a ball. It got offloaded inside, bounced off a guy's face, bounced back to the guy who had offloaded it, and that guy scored a try. I'm like, this is why people take the piss out of Super Rugby. But like I say, I'm grumpy, and if people want to call me a hater, fine. Everybody else is allowed to enjoy it. And you know what? I'm going to be renewing my Sky subscription this week, and I'm going to watch it. So maybe I'm the idiot. What were the actual results of the games, mate? Do you want to talk us through what actually happened?
Yeah, so the best game of the weekend was the opening game, which was the Chiefs versus the Crusaders. Chiefs pipped it. So I forget what the final score was, but it was actually quite close in the end. But we also saw, as you mentioned, the Reds beat the Waratahs, with former Wales out half having gone viral with the killer pass, as Highlanders got a win over Moana. Our Drua favourites suffered a tricky first half away to the Blues and went down 34-10. The Rebels also lost at home to the Brumbies. They lost by 27 points. That game finished 30 points to 3.
Just quickly, while I remember,
Gosh.
so the rumor is that with the Rebels potentially this broke just before the pod. So it's reported by America's Oval that with the Rebels potentially going out of Super Rugby, they would be replaced by Jaguares, who would come back,
Wow.
who were in negotiations to come back anyway, but that would be stepped up by a year. And apparently Jaguares are very, very keen to come back. So they would happily do that. But that's just the rumor at the moment.
What else happened? Oh, one thing we have to touch on as well is the Gum Shield drama. I don't know if you saw this, but there were 6 games, as we mentioned, in Super Rugby in the opening weekend, but there were actually 8 players removed for HIAs due to hits that were picked up by the new Gum Shield technology that we've all seen introduced in Six Nations. There haven't been that many players in Six Nations off the top of my head that I can think of that have been removed. I think Van der Vlier was removed and subsequently actually ended up passing his HIA. But there were a lot in the opening weekend, which has raised a few flags. But I know one for certain was an error. There was a glitch. So I think, towards the end of the Chiefs Crusaders game, Anton Leonard-Brown was removed, but that was 100% due to a glitch. And there seems to be a lot of negative press coming out of a lot of the players and the coaching staff from Super Rugby sides, which I think is not a good look. We all know why this type of technology needs to be introduced. I don't know, what's your take on this, mate? Are you for me, it's just shut up and get on with it.
Yeah,
it is what it is.
I'm surprised that we know that it was the gum shields that caused it. Like, why announce it? It's part of the medical procedure of the game. I don't understand why it's even a matter of discussion. I know sometimes in the Northern Hemisphere we think that the Southern Hemisphere guys aren't quite caught up to the head impacts debate. Like, they still do the 20-minute red card thing that I don't like. So yeah, I think just get on with it, guys. And were you watching, was it the breakdown that they had the medical guy on explaining it?
They did indeed. The former Irish medical officer, the Irish team medic, basically his name's El Aina, I think is it Falvey. So he did a really interesting interview, and yeah, they're still gathering data. They're still, he did, so basically there's been a bit of a negative reaction to the amount of HIAs that there were in the opening round, but he did, bring us back to the beginning of the HIA process and how there was a bit of confusion around that. There were teething issues. It took teams quite a while and players and coaches to get used to it. But now it's just like nobody questions HIAs anymore. People just, they see a player coming off, and they know it's for a good reason. So I think it's going to take us a while to maybe get used to it and accept it, but it is what it is. It's all about player safety. And the last thing people should be worrying about is complaining about players being removed. When we're talking about their brains. But one thing I actually noticed as well, I don't know if you ever noticed this watching not a single player playing in the Crusaders Chiefs game was wearing a scrum cap. Do you ever notice that none of the All Blacks players ever wear scrum caps? Or am I making that up? But for me, a lot of New Zealand professional players don't seem to wear them. as much
Yeah,
as
it
players
feels
from
like
other countries.
it
And
feels
if
like
you
all
do,
the,
by the way, if I'm completely oblivious to a prominent All Black, please let me know in the comments. But yeah, what's your thought, mate?
yeah, no, I can't think of any either. Now you mention it, either. I'm sure like some of them will have worn one while they were recovering from like a cut or something. It feels like all the most famous Australian players, like you picture like Australian rugby players, you think of the scrum cap and the gloves. Like they seem to all wear that. And obviously, I can think of loads of ones from different countries. In South Africa, it seems to be the backs that mostly wear the scrum caps, not the forwards.
Also,
But
speaking of gloves, is that should the gloves be brought back, and maybe just like should a glove company do a deal with England Rugby and see if that improves their handling? I don't know. Maybe that's what they need. Yeah, just an interesting
yeah. So people
side
let us
note for
know
me.
in the comments below. Name an All Black who wore a scrum cap. We can't think of any.
But we're going to get to story in the comments. Let's move on. Let's move on to Japan Rugby League One. So the Brave Leopards are up to second with a win over Cannon Eagles, whilst Liam Williams, I should say, was kicking the goals for Kuboto Spears as they beat Kenetsu Liners. What's going on in Super Rugby Americas, Hugh?
So the Dogos are 2 from 2 after beating the Cobras, but Cobras obviously got that fantastic win in week 1 over Peñarol. The other Argentinian team, Pampas, are just behind Dogos, having beat American Raptors, who sit bottom. Into the Northern Hemisphere results. So arguably the game of the weekend was the one that I alluded to earlier, which was the Paris Derby. It saw Stade Francais stay top. It was a very well-earned win, but Toulouse are now level on points with them after beating Clermont. Bordeaux lost again, this time to Castres. Castres now overtake them to go third. And Oyonnax are hosting Montpellier next weekend in a relegation six-pointer. So we'll keep an eye on the result for that one. Into the Pro D2, Provence missed a chance to go top after losing to fourth placed Angoulême. There was also a big win for Colomiers over Biarritz. So the top of the Pro D2 is fascinating this season. Like there's 3 teams, Béziers, Vannes, and Provence. Any of them could go up, and they've all got their own thing, and they're all very different, but they've got really interesting characters as clubs and teams. So I'm loving following the Pro D2, even though you can't watch it in the UK. If you go on YouTube, you can find highlights of all the games, including SI de la Week, which is a great watch, and there's always some fun tries in there. Anyway, what about the English Championship, mate?
So Coventry stayed in the battle for second with a win over Ampthill, but they're a long way behind Ealing, who beat Cambridge by 50 points. In terms of the AIL, there were no games this past weekend, so we've nothing to cover there. But let's move on to the TV guide and look forward to the rugby that's coming up. So the URC is back. We've got Connacht versus the Scarlets and Bulls versus the Stormers. They're just some of the
Rugby Derby, take 2.
big ones coming up. I think the Bulls, last time I checked, have sold over 30,000 tickets,
So
as you
definitely
do.
over 30,000.
So looking forward to that.
The Stormers in the last couple of months would have played in front of 30,000 people more than they wouldn't have. It's insane. No other rugby club in the world is doing this.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, it's safe to say I think the South Africans have bought into the URC, so we can kind of put that whole debate and question to bed. There's no Six Nations coming up, but that's not a problem because there are 31 games confirmed that are going to be televised across Ireland and the UK. We're still waiting on Viaplay to announce whether or not they're going to be showing many of top 14 games because Viaplay's third channel is now gone, so they don't have as much capacity. So we're not sure if they're going to show top 14 games. They probably will. They'll probably just stream them on their app, but we'll listen out to or watch our socials for more updates on that. But we've got URC, we've got top 14, we've got Rugby Europe Championship, we've got Celtic Challenge, we got Premiership Women's Rugby. There are actually 4 games as well being broadcast in that league, which is really good to see. Some of them are going to be available on. So I know the first game between Gloucester Hartpury and next year is going to be on TNT Sports 1. But there'll also be a game on Saturday as well between Ealing and Bristol on YouTube. And there will also be another game between Saracens and Tigers also available on YouTube. We'll have the full schedule out in our Friday pod, so don't worry, and we'll have it out on our socials. And there's also a game on Sunday on TNT Sports. So great to see 4 games televised, because we usually only get 1. So I think that's good to see. And there is, of course, more Super Rugby back. But maybe more importantly for our fans in the United States, if we have any, Major League Rugby is back this weekend. And I remind you that you can watch all games for free on the Rugby Network.
Phew.
Is that it, mate, or did we forget anything?
I have no doubt that we'll have forgotten something. But we will
pop it
be
in the thread
informed.
about it. I can't wait to find out that we've missed probably like the greatest All Black of all time, and find out that he wore a scrum cap.
And I don't want a photo of Richie McCaw wearing a scrum cap once. That's not. I want an All Black who wore one every game, please. Anyway, let's leave it there.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Oh, I have to edit that. It took me ages to stop.